Alright, so welcome back, and in this clip we'll talk about the volume axis field. Well, a volume axis field is a beautiful combination of volume emitter and the turbulence field. So right now in our scene we have a very simple geometry. Let's do one thing. Let's select this and emit the particles, and then we apply the volume axis field. So first of all, let's select this geometry and let's go inside the end particles menu and then use the option emit from object. So I like to keep the emitter type as a surface with no speed, and let's say we use the rate 7500 per second and hit the option create. Alright, and let me also go inside the end particle shape node and change the gravity settings. Let's use the ignore solver gravity, and let's also hide this geometry for a while. And now if you play the timer, you can see the particles have started been getting emitted from this mesh. And I think so let's say we just need to hold it for 30,000 particles, or maybe 31,000. And now we are at frame 100. Let's initialize this 100 frames so that we can retain the position of the particles at frame 1. So we can select the particles and go inside the field solvers, and under the initial state we have set for the selected. Alright, now roll this back. Now let's do one thing. Let's delete the emitter, or let's say we disable the rate. That's much better. Okay, and press Ctrl A to get inside the end particle shape node. Let's change the point size to the 1, and let's also change the overall color. Let's say we add two color. One is the blue and another one is the red, or maybe something like yellow. Alright, and this is nice. And let's use the color input mode to the speed. So once the speed change, the color will change. And let me also drag this a bit here. That's fine. And let's also use the color accumulations. Pretty nice. So right now we have an object which is a flower, a rose, and this is now covered with the particles. Now let's drop or apply the volume axis field. So select the particles, move inside the field solvers, and over here we have volume axis. This field will work only when it's inside some volume shape. Alright, so let's do one thing. Let's go inside the volume control attributes and change the volume shape to the sphere, and that's very nice. And the overall scope and the effect of the field is only inside the range. Outside this, the field will not affect the particles. And once I take you inside the volume speed attributes, you can see that you all have already familiar with the attributes. Like, we know the meaning of away from center, so this will exert the force and that will send the particles away from the center point. We have the away from the axis, which works in the case of the cylindrical, torus, and tube. All these attributes which we have already discussed inside the volume emitters. And over here we have the turbulence attributes. Alright, so let's do one thing. Let's create some interesting effect with this. We have the setting of magnitude and attenuation inside the volume axis field attributes, so this will control the overall the strength of the field. And let's leave the magnitude to the 5. Now let's do one thing. Let's for a while disable the away from the center, put this thing to 0, and instead of 0 I recommend you use a value, let's say -1.5. so this will going to retain the particles inside the overall shape. Okay, and let's also play around with the value around the axis. Let's say use a value of 5, and this will going to rotate the particles based upon the center line of the axis. That's very nice. And now we have the turbulence. Alright, so let's do one thing before we start playing with the value of turbulence at all. Let's play the timeline and see the overall impact. So you can see that it is really working. I mean, it's way too much fast because the magnitude of the field is way too much high. So we can reduce this by lowering down the overall magnitude, and this will going to affect the entire attributes of your field. And with this change, you can notice the field has dipped down the overall strength, but still we can notice the overall effect is way too much high. So we could deal with this by lowering down the conserve. Let me use a value of, let's say, 0.75. and now if you play the timeline, you'll see now particles are simply and slowly moving inside this field. And this is also creating something nice effect, but we can go furthermore. Now let's start exploring the important attributes, that is the turbulence. All right, and let's also use this, the multi-sample anti-aliasing, so that will going to smooth out the overall particles. And we can also use this, motion blur. However, it will not going to affect the particles, but I've just realized that if we use this, then it will just speed up the the overall FPS of your scenes and make the time slider works a little bit more faster. So let's do one thing. Let's now introduce the turbulence. We'll keep a value 1, and as we all know that turbulence is a field which affects the overall behavior of particles by introducing the pattern of disturbances or a noise, and that is based upon the frequency, which decides the how often these disturbances will appear. Now we have two interesting attributes. One is the turbulence speed and the detailed turbulence. The detailed turbulence is an attribute which will add a secondary turbulence to the overall turbulence. That means it will create some more small but nice detailed features, and I'll take you to inside this attribute a little later. We have turbulence speed as well. Well, this will going to change the overall rate of the turbulence, and if we use the value of 1, then it means for every single second the overall turbulence will going to change over time. All right, so let's use the turbulence frequency a little bit less. Let's say 0.75, 0.75, and 0.75. All right, now let's also do one thing. Let's hide this field so that we can take down the full effect of the field. And now let's play the timeline, and now you can see with this turbulence added, the field is now creating an effect of overall turbulence and the noise. Let's also improvise the stuff. Well, we can let's increase the turbulence frequency to, let's say, 1 again, because this is still a kind of a smooth effect. And let's also increase the detailed turbulence to, let's say, 0.25. all right, I think so the turbulence is way too much high, so we'll get dip it to value of 0.5. And now if we play the timeline, you can see now I can have some very nice motions. And this small disturbances going on, it's due to the detailed turbulence. If I just increase the value, you'll notice that now the pattern is becoming really very messy, and it's a lot of noise. But that's again a kind of a personal choice. So I like to keep down the value of detailed turbulence to maybe 0.35 around. Alright, and now let's play the timeline once again. So with this change, you can notice the nice overall change inside the flow of the particles, and you can also see that they are also getting animated. This is just because of the turbulence speed. If we just reduce the value of turbulence speed, you will notice that now the particles will only take down the effect of the overall turbulence as well as the detailed turbulence. And this is not something really very nice, because if you introduce the value of speed, then you will have some more nice controls. All right, and I also have got some interesting output for you, which this is basically the play blast, and we just take it inside the After Effects, and I just reverse the overall clip. So now let's move inside the another important field, that is the volume axis curve. All right, so let's get started with that one.